Thank you, Mr. President. From the second that they wake up in the morning to the moment they put their heads on the pillow at night, the American people are burning through cash. And as I have spent the last 2 weeks talking with Tennesseans, talking with people in the real world, Mr. President, this is a sentiment that they continue to talk about. Now, they know inflation is real. It wasn't temporary. It wasn't something that was just a problem for the rich. It's a problem that hits every single individual. And the spin that is coming out of the White House really is not resonating with hard-working taxpayers anymore. When I'm out and about in Tennessee, people are talking about inflation, the border, and the sense of despair that they see taking over their communities, and they cannot get over the lengths to which this White House and this administration has gone to try to convince them that everything's okay. You don't have anything to worry about. Things are better than they have ever been. They can't believe it. They can't believe that this administration is living in the land of denial, because they know that this message doesn't add up with the reality of their lives, and they've spent 16 months digging themselves out from under massive gas and grocery bills every time they fill up the tank or they fill up the grocery cart. They know that it is probably more than 8% inflation. Every time they go to the hardware store, they see it. When they're buying a gallon of paint or fertilizer for their garden, they see it. And the few discretionary dollars they used to allow themselves for some new clothes or the occasional food delivery now go to essentials, and even then, they still are making tough choices. As I said, from the second they wake up in the morning to the moment their heads hit the pillow at night, the American people are burning through cash almost as fast as Joe Biden and the Democrats are burning through our taxpayer dollars. The Biden administration might not take this seriously. They may say, well, just go print more money. Look at the amount of debt they've run up. Tennesseans do take this issue seriously. And at this point, they laugh at the alternate reality coming from D.C. And they know that the Putin price hike is something that is so divorced from reality. It wasn't enough for Joe Biden to abandon his responsibilities. He had to take the extra step of exploiting the more than 2,500 innocent civilians Vladimir Putin has murdered in Ukraine. It's just disgusting. But that's the Democrat playbook, isn't it? Never let a crisis go to waste. Pick up words that you can use in your spin. If the White House had stopped to think about what American taxpayers do when they're broke, when they've gotten to their end of their money before they get to the end of their month, when they have debt rolling over them, then the White House might have realized that now is not the time to spend more money on programs that the taxpayers do not want. Now, every Tennessean who has good common sense, and we've got hundreds of thousands of them, they know that nobody would commit to a self-destructive agenda just because they thought they could force somebody else to go pick up the tab and pay for it. It doesn't make sense. But that is what this administration is doing. And, Mr. President, I think this is one of those things that in their playbook they think sounds great. But with the American people, this is going to backfire. And through all of this, the president has shown the people who he is and what priorities really matter to him. Instead of exercising some much-needed self-control, he decided to beg for the Green New Deal, wasteful social spending, and an election takeover. His allies in Congress have even come back to Washington ready to make a deal with the devil to resurrect his Build Back Broke agenda. In the interest of bipartisanship, I'd like to offer some thoughts to my Democratic colleagues. Next time that you go home, go over to the grocery store and ask a busy mom who's holding a shopping list in one hand and digital coupons on her phone in the other, just how they're managing through this inflation crisis. Ask them, do you think it is stuck at 8% inflation? Do you think it's closer to 15% inflation? Then follow their advice, because I can guarantee you they will choose to give you an earful. They are about fed up. There are thousands of moms and grandmoms that know what they're doing, and more importantly, they know how they're going to spend every single penny that they have itemized in their budget for groceries, for gas, for the summer garden. They know how they're going to spend that money. They wish Washington would be as careful with taxpayer money as they are being with their hard-earned dollars. It really makes them shake their heads when they hear that the caretakers of the most powerful nation in the world have no vision for the future and no plan for how to get us to a vision. All that this administration and the White House and the Democrats, who, by the way, are in charge of all the government here in Washington, D.C., all they have is an agenda. They've got a to-do list. They're wanting to check the boxes. And that agenda is heavy on spending and light on everything else that matters to the American people. And by the way, all that heavy spending, it's not federal government money, mind you. It is money that is coming out of the pocket of hard-working taxpayers, every penny of it. We know border security isn't on the Biden administration's list of priorities. It's not on the to-do list. It's not on the thinking about it list. And the alternate reality that this White House is operating in, the only immigration policy that matters is guaranteeing an open border. The sooner they can get it, the better. They are all about it. We all know how well that policy has worked out so far. On behalf of a lot of Tennesseans back home, I'd like to inject a little reality into this conversation also. Since day one of this administration, Joe Biden has done everything in his power to sabotage the Border Patrol and local law enforcement officials. His open borders rhetoric invited massive caravans of migrants to overwhelm the border. And just when we thought things couldn't get worse, he turned his back on President Trump's successful Remain in Mexico program. As a result, last month, encounters along our southern border were up 33%. That's right, up 33% in 1 month. CBP regularly seizes millions of dollars worth of meth, fentanyl, and heroin that would have otherwise landed in small-town USA. And now, President Biden wants to abandon Title 42, which is the last best defense we have against this wave of illegal immigration. We already know that if he goes through with this, he will lose control of the border to the cartels. Border Patrol estimates that 18,000 people a day will try to make it across the border. Now, currently, there are 6,000 people a day. Those are record numbers. Think of what is going to happen if 18,000 people a day are rushing our southern border. Now, let me give you a little perspective on this. Tennessee has 345 towns and cities. So we check to see how many of these towns and cities are 18,000 people or less. Well, 90% of the towns and cities in the state of Tennessee are 18,000 people, 18,000 residents or fewer than that. Now, Mr. President, think about that. It's like a Tennessee town, that number of people coming across the border every day. I would think that, it is the same thing, Mr. President, in Michigan. Don't know the number of towns and cities you have, but I would imagine that the majority of those are there also, 18,000 or fewer residents. Think about this impact. How many days can you do that? How many weeks? How many years? Before you completely disrupt what is going on in your towns, in your state. I have to ask you, what is so compassionate about subjecting 18,000 people a day, 18,000, to the risk of exploitation by a drug cartel? And what is so compassionate about standing by while 18,000 people a day risk death by exposure in the desert? Is sticking to your talking points worth the lives of National Guardsmen like Bishop Evans, who drowned last week while trying to rescue migrants crossing the Rio Grande River? The decision to abandon Title 42 is dangerous, and frankly, anyone who supports it should be ashamed of themselves. Last month, I joined several of my colleagues on a letter to Chairman Durbin asking him to allow the Judiciary Committee to get some answers about how the administration plans to deal with this. The committee must use its oversight authority to summon Secretary Mayorkas for a hearing so he can explain his plan to prevent chaos on the border. If that plan exists, we don't know about it, but certainly tripling the number of people per day at the southern border is going to create a chaotic situation. I want to make it clear that this use of our oversight authority is the bare minimum. And as of now, Chairman Durbin has not indicated he's willing to meet this very minimum bar. We must not allow the administration to hide behind their Title 42 talking points. The American people won't stand for it because they know that until Joe Biden secures the border, until he puts back in place the Remain in Mexico policy, until he keeps Title 42, that every town will be a border town and every state will be a border state. When I'm in Tennessee and talking with Tennesseans, what we know is they're like a lot of people all across this country. They don't trust their government to have their interest at heart. They don't take the actions of their government seriously because the Democratic-controlled government, all branches here in D.C., they don't seem to take their job seriously. They're certainly not looking out for the American people. They're not taking actions that are going to reduce the cost of a gallon of gas at the pump, or the cost of food at the grocery store, or the cost of paint, the cost of fertilizer, the cost of tools, the list goes on and on. But what they do believe is it is time for this administration to make inflation, to make border security, to make the sovereignty of this nation a priority, and begin to build a vision for this nation, not just a to-do list. I yield the floor.